Okay, I think we are good to get started. Welcome. We're excited to present to you. Today we'll be talking about our community has a homeless plan, now what? Implementation strategies for using data-driven decision-making. And I'm presenting with the lovely Summer Rower from Lantern House. And my name is Andy Beatles and I'm with the Weber Housing Authority. So we're gonna talk about right now about the history of our homeless plan. So you can see here our timeline of how our plan came about. So in early 2018, our community identified a need. And what happened was a few of the homeless service providers got together and we had said, we want as a community to be working towards something. And at this time, our LHCC was stagnant. We had the wrong people at the table at our LHCC. We didn't have a purpose. We really had no direction. And our leadership was not invested. And it just felt like our LHCC was not a decision-making body. So a few of us got together and said, what if we created a plan? And then everybody, we were really excited about it. And then they came back to me and said, okay, now what? And obviously I have no experience in writing a plan. And so we started the work to apply for grants and secure funding to hire a contract employee to create a homeless plan for Weber County. That was in around September, October 2018. And then in July of 2019, we had the finished product. Our plan was complete. And so Summer, do you have anything you want to add about that? Oh, wait, you're muted.
I swear I do that every time. So first of all, I was just going to say, when I was watching Jonathan Hardy this morning, I was wondering if he did what I sometimes do, which is business on the top and COVID/pajamas on the bottom. But I don't know, who will know? I'm wearing pants today, not pajamas. So Andy and I feel like we've worked together for a really long time in the homeless field. And it's really actually the first time we've presented together, I think, at the Homeless Summit, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So I'm super excited about that. But through our community, I feel like we've seen a lot of things. We've seen some really amazing things and some not so amazing things. So we've experienced like leadership changes and development of programs. And most importantly, like we've seen a lot of chronically homeless people housed and a lot of positive outcomes. So I feel like, we've seen our community develop a lot throughout the years. I wanted to say this because I don't think you will, Andy, but this plan would have never happened without you and your work with Ashley Tolman. And so, I think that if anybody takes anything from this session, it's to follow your lead and be that person to willing to take off your agency hat as the director and put on a hat of leadership and as a community member and step in that way. I think it's important to mention that we're all have 5,000 things going on and we probably don't have extra people and extra funding, but in order for something like this to work, we do have to set that aside and do our best as a community. So I just wanted to say that and thank you for everything you did for our community and for this plan.
Thanks, Summer. That's nice of you to say.
Yeah.
But it is important to know that it was I applied for the funding, but it was a community-based plan. And I think we'll talk about this throughout the plan, but it is a systems level plan. And without the support and the input of all of our service providers, it wouldn't be possible. So I appreciate your support, Summer. Okay, so now we have a plan. So our plan was finished. We were super excited for our plan to come out. We had many input meetings with both service providers and homeless or individuals experiencing homelessness. But now we had a plan. And so where do we start? So we knew from the very beginning that our very first task was to solicit support from elected officials. And I think there have been other sessions on this, but this was kind of tricky. We had, I'll talk about that more in just a second, but we had many conversations with key community agencies, with government officials. I presented this plan over and over the months after the plan was done in an effort to rally support and to get the word out that we were adopting this as a community and that these were goals that we were working towards. So back to soliciting support from elected officials, I think it's important to note here that I think I had mentioned at the time that we had decided to create a plan that we did not have leadership that was engaged in our homeless systems. And we wanted to have something in place that would help us continue momentum regardless of who our elected official was, regardless of who, if they did have an interest or they didn't have an interest. And at first, our elected official, that's our LHCC chair, had his doubts about the plan. And we're grateful that he came around. He actually read it and thought, no way. And then he read it again and read it a third time. And it wasn't until he had read the plan the third time that he said, okay, I think this is something that we can implement in our community. And we started moving forward. So, Summer, I'll let you take over.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, trying to put that back on. So we're going to talk about like where we are or where we want to be. I think that when we were looking at the plan, I kind of feel like it was similar to when you go and get a weight loss plan developed and it's personalized and it's detailed and it looks awesome and you're super excited. And then they give it to you and you're not quite sure because you don't know if you have the time, the dedication, the support from your family, and you're not even quite sure you have the buy-in. So I kind of feel it's like that. So I think that the only option was to look at the plan and start prioritizing and taking the aspects of it that will go with our community and the resources that we have and what we're able to do. So I'll turn it over to Andy to start looking over that.
Yeah, thanks, Summer. And so, yeah, we were, I think when it first came out, even though we were super excited, it was very overwhelming. And it is important to note that we were like, okay, where do we start in this? Like I had mentioned, we did have the support of our county commissioner who bought into the plan. So as I go through this first focus area, I'll kind of talk a little bit about that. So focus area number one in the plan was to improve system planning and oversight. So it was to completely reorganize the scope and membership of the LHCC. Like I said, we had the wrong people at the table. We had case managers that were attending. We had individuals that did not have any decision-making ability at the table, where we needed somebody from each agency that could make decisions and help us move the work forward. Our second action item was to hire a homeless systems coordinator, then to form subcommittees and work groups, and then document this new leadership structure. So we had nothing at this point. We didn't have any bylaws. We didn't have any articles of incorporation. We really had no documentation on what our LHCC's goals or priorities were. Then The next focus area was to develop performance management plans, review the funding and establish priorities, remove barriers to housing first as a system and within projects, and then train our LHCC members and local decision makers, and then support training for service providers, and then learn from persons with homeless experience, making sure that we're including lived experience in the process.
So the focus area 2 was to become a data-driven system. So the focus of this was to use data to drive planning, decision-making, and evaluation. I really like how it was set up because we have the strategy and then the action items. So in our strategies, the first one was to increase the availability of useful data and reporting. So it was to work with our, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Work with our housing and community development to localize state and COC level reporting to Weber County. The 2.1.2 is to create a clearinghouse for homeless data and information. Number 2 is to improve data quality, which is to develop a plan and bring it to our LHCC for adoption, and support data quality and inclusion for domestic violence service providers. The next one, use data in every community, which the action item was provide system program performance training. And then we have agency and program meeting and include a detailed policy for data use.
Andy, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. I would have just kept talking. So thanks, Summer, for pointing out I also like the way that this is laid out. So our next focus area number 3, is to make homelessness rare. And so the objective here is to reduce the number of persons who experience in homelessness in Weber County. So our first strategy is to develop a Weber County Affordable Housing Plan. And then the action item is to create an Affordable Housing Committee. And then here in 3.2, reorient homeless prevention models. So expand diversion programs to fill service gaps, create a hub for homeless prevention information and assistance, and then use local data to target high-risk households. And then strategy 3.3, improve coordination with systems and initiatives service low income and vulnerable people, which then our action items are to use community resources to target individuals and families most at risk of homelessness, and then 3.3.2, improve efforts to prevent people from entering homelessness as they transition from other systems. So this focus area is mostly about prevention in our community.
So I'm going to talk about the focus area 4, which is making homelessness brief. And the objective is to reduce the average length of time persons experiencing homelessness. So again, we have our strategies, which the first strategy is enhance the coordinated entry process. The action items are use reference tools to evaluate and revise local coordinated entry policy and practice, adopt a universal system management approach to housing prioritization, consider streamlining and jointly resourcing housing navigation and landlord outreach activities to rapidly house homeless households. The next strategy is to quickly identify and respectfully engage persons experiencing homelessness. So the action items are use client input to expand coordinated entry, outreach, and inreach. Ensure street outreach teams have the capacity for routine outreach, and coordinate street outreach and advocate for policies that do not criminalize homelessness. The last one is to ensure emergency services are client-centered, low barrier, and housing focused. The recommendations is to use reference tools to evaluate emergency shelters and to create self-accessible resources and information to facilitate homeless exit plans and self-resolution.
And then focus area 5 is to make homelessness non-recurring. So reduce the returns to homelessness. So the strategy is to increase the utilization and quality of PSH programs. And then the action items for that strategy are to prioritize funding for additional PSH case managers, scale rapid rehousing caseloads, the length of assistance and case manager training to match participant need, and then finally to use reference tools to evaluate our programs. And then strategy 5.2 is ensure community supports are available and commiserate with client need. 5.2.1, the action item is to improve pathways to clinical treatment, supported employment, and other services tailored for persons with disabilities. The next action item is to review and improve access to programs that could increase a formerly homeless person's ability to gain employment and income supports. And then to prioritize homeless prevention resources for persons who have previously experienced homelessness. And then strategy 5.3 is to increase the flow through the availability of permanent housing. And this, the action item 5.3.1, develop a project-based PSH facility to expand the continuum of available housing in Weber County and house vulnerable families and households. And then increase rapid rehousing programming, and then employ effective exit and move on strategies for permanent housing. So you can see through these, and that's our final focus area. You can see that the goals and the action items in our plan are kind of vast. I mean, they span from creating new subcommittees all the way to developing a permanent supportive housing project. So it does cover quite a bit of, we have a lot of work to do is what I'm trying to say. So those were the recommendations from the plan. Now here's where we're actually at. And I'll let Summer take over.
Thanks, Sandy. See, wasn't that easy? Like that all seemed really easy to me.
Yeah.
So although our community still has a lot to do, I think we're pretty happy with the progress and the direction we're going right now. I think we understand that community priorities, leadership direction, agency abilities, and funding will continuously be changing. I think our LHCC understands that the plan is and needs to be adaptable, especially with whatever is going on in the community and the world. For example, COVID. So our priorities have changed, and we have had to look at different funding and switched to making sure that we're safe and stopping the spread of COVID in our community.
Yeah, definitely. And oh, go ahead.
No, I'm done. Thanks, Andy.
I was just gonna say, so once COVID did hit, we just kind of had to put a lot of things on pause. I feel like we had a lot of momentum. We were moving forward in a positive direction, and then, we had bigger fires that we needed to put out in our own agencies. Let's see, and we are, just like Summer said, we are trying to be realistic about the goals that we're trying to adopt for our community. So here's where we're at. As far as focus area number 1 goes. So we've accomplished most of the things, most of the action items in focus area 1. So we revised our LHCC, the scope and membership. We hired a homeless service provider. Now, this is probably the most significant accomplishment in our plan. This has been huge in our community. So like I had mentioned, we were able to solicit the support of our county commissioner, who then came up with the funding to hire this homeless services systems coordinator. Her name is Danielle, and she's amazing. And it's so I just want to talk for a minute about the benefits of having Danielle. Like Summer said, all of our agencies are so overwhelmed and at capacity, and couldn't dedicate the time and the resources to make these drastic changes and to implement all of these action items and strategies in our community. So now that we have a dedicated person that can dedicate the time, we feel like great change is going to happen and has been happening. Also, Danielle is a third party, a neutral third party. She isn't competing for funding, and she has the resources and the time to commit to making, adopting the strategies in this plan. So we reformed, or we created subcommittees and work groups in our LHCC. We have documented the new leadership structure. And then finally, in 1.2.2, we reviewed the funding, established priorities where we were able to identify gaps in the program. And there may be more on this that Danielle has been working on, but these are the ones that I'm aware of that we have accomplished. So I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Summer will talk about the goals that we've accomplished in focus area number 2.
Thanks. I think the plan says it best with our focus area 2. It says, data-driven decision-making requires collecting, cleaning, and using data to inform each aspect of the work we do in the homeless service system, which I love. So with focus area 2, our community did prioritize this area, and we knew that this was important for us to do. So one of the first strategies was to increase the availability of useful data and reports. And I think everyone knows that it doesn't matter how many reports you get or how much data you get, if it's not what your community needs or you don't understand it, it's not going to be helpful in the long run. So this was a really important aspect to look at and decide what's going on, because without that, we can't start making decisions. We can't use that if we don't have reliable data. So under the direction of the LHCC and our data subcommittee, we worked closely with the Homeless Services Office to track, understand, and obtain the reports our community needs. And this is an ongoing basis. I think our committee and the LHCC is continually looking at what works for us, what additional numbers we need, and that also, has to go back to HMIS and what they're capable of and what our community is capable of. So we've been working on that. On 2.2, improve data quality. So again, with the guidance from our homeless systems coordinator and the LHCC and our data subcommittee, we are looking at our data and how to improve it and what it looks like. And so I think the improve the data quality plan is directly linked to our data subcommittee and the goals that we're making there. Also, we have our local domestic violence service provider that's in that subcommittee and part of that discussion. So on to 3, the use data in every community. Again, with our LHCC and our new systems coordinator, we're really trying to make sure that everyone is on the table and that we're receiving the necessary information and training throughout the community. And then, as Andy talked about, we are currently and have been developing key policy to align with our homeless plan, the state's homeless plan, and what our community is needing.
Perfect. Thanks, Summer. Do you You want to talk about our data subcommittee?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, and as Andy talked about, one of the things that came out of our homeless plan was our data subcommittee. And I think this is one of the things that is really key in making sure that our plan is data driven and we utilize all the recommendations. So in developing the data subcommittee, the LHCC made sure to identify and bring the people to the table that would bring expertise, knowledge to the committee. And also they wanted to make sure that different agencies, population, services were also there. When we decided, okay, this is who needs to be part of the committee, we then got together as a group and tried to figure out what our goals and scope of work were. But it was kind of easy because we had the homeless plan to work off. So we said, well, let's look at the homeless plan and decide from there. So we identified membership, frequency of meetings, and then we decided to start looking at our community's data, which right when we started looking at our data, there was a lot of discussion. We kind of had to put a stop at that point and figure out what we should do because there were so many different hats that everyone wanted to start with a different data point or start in a different direction. And so as a team, we decided that we needed to create a survey to gather everyone's voices throughout the community. And after this, Andy will go over the survey and the results to kind of show you what came out of that.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
While the survey was going on, we started looking at how we can take the data and performance measurement outcomes provided by HMIS and actually use it and compare it to what's going on. Andy and I were talking about this because it was actually hard to take a report that took all the programs and you saw your outcome measurements when you know how different each program is. And so there was a lot of discussion around that. And do you have anything to add to that, Andy?
Yeah, just so for example, my programs are permanent supportive housing programs. And so as the data came out, I knew exactly what the permanent supportive housing systems performance measures. I knew what those numbers meant. I knew where the data was inaccurate, but also on that report was also the emergency shelter and rapid rehousing and the other programs, which I don't know anything about. And I'm sure Summer is the same way, that she's familiar with her programs and is less familiar with the programs that she doesn't administer. And so there's kind of been a learning curve as far as the data in our community. And then I just also wanted to point out too, that we had never received consistent data at our LHCC. We weren't reviewing it. We weren't, sometimes we'd have reports, but usually they were incorrect or agencies were missing. I mean, there were just so many issues with the data. And I just wanted to emphasize that this data subcommittee, I think we all knew that this needed to be a key component of moving forward with our homeless plan. So we decided to, like Summer said, we decided to put out a community survey in Weber County. So these are some of the questions that we asked, and we wanted we wanted to conduct this survey among all levels of staff at an agency. So from the executive director down to the case manager, so that we could have a really good and clear idea of what exactly we needed to provide to our community. So, after name and organization and position, we asked, in what capacity do you use HMIS? Do you understand the data that you're collecting? And so that it's useful for your organization, and what data points do you frequently find missing within your organization? What additional training do you feel comfortable with managing? What additional training do you need to feel comfortable with managing data related to your job? And do you feel that you receive enough technical support from your organization to adequately pull reports? Are you currently working on HMIS? Are you currently working with HMIS on any data quality issues? And then what data points would be helpful to have in your position or in your agency? So we sent this survey out, and we only had a few people respond. So then we sent it out again and said, and I think at that point we actually offered a $10 gift card. If to somebody, we would draw a name and somebody would win a $10 gift card, so that we could get some good results from these questions.
And Andy, I was just going to add, how interesting it was when we were talking about what the survey should say, what the beliefs were from each agency, that the issues we were having with data in our community. So like you mentioned, the different programs. So I was just going to say, I just think the whole process of developing and talking about what we thought each agency thought the need was, and so that just shows you that we definitely, needed a little bit more collaboration and connection and looking at what our community was currently working with.
Yeah, definitely. And which is the perfect segue into our next slide, which is the results of the survey. So we were not anticipating the results that we got back. We thought that perhaps we needed additional HMIS training, but what we learned from the results, and like I said, we received excellent feedback. We had 80 surveys from service providers from all different levels. And the main thing that we learned was that our agencies don't feel like they need additional training from HMIS. They feel like they know how to navigate the system and they know what they're doing. And then another unexpected result of the survey was that we learned that DV providers experience frustration regarding access to housing for DV victims. Now, this has kind of been an ongoing theme, but we didn't realize to the extent that our DV providers were experiencing frustration. And Summer, did you have anything you wanted to add on the results of the survey as well?
Yeah, I was with what I said prior, that it was just interesting that we all thought something else and then the results came out. So I thought it was really interesting that people didn't need training, that everyone felt like they understood what was going on. And I think that it was important to have the caseworkers and everyone from different levels fill it out. So it wasn't just the directors and the program administrators talking for the caseworkers saying, oh, they feel like they need more support from HMIS, or they don't understand this. So I think it was important to find out that, yes, they do understand HMIS and they understand how to do it and don't feel like they need more training. So it was good to do, and I think it was interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like if we wouldn't have done this, our first thing we would have done would be to introduce additional trainings from HMIS and to, conduct additional education. Whereas now we know that that's not where we feel like we need to improve.
I was just going to say that I wonder how often communities or our community has done that, where we say, oh, yeah, we need this or we need that. And then we, are trying to represent our caseworkers or someone else when we were wrong.
No, I agree. And for us to say, especially as administrators, to say something like, I know what our community needs. This is what we need, when we really have no idea. So, Summer, do you want to start us off on why you want your community to be a data-driven system?
Yeah. So I think everyone, there's no one that's going to say, I don't want to be a data-driven system. I don't think there's anybody that would say that, because they know how important it is and what it means to the community. I think that data should influence resource allocation, goal setting, and everything in our homeless system. If you want to move to the next, I think another thing, and I was talking to Andy about this, is that not everybody likes numbers and data and wants to, even though we should be data driven. So I like numbers and data, and I'm kind of a big nerd, but I don't think Andy is a nerd.
Oh, I'm a nerd, but I hate numbers. And every time the point in time count comes out, it's hard for me to look at that data and paint a picture of what that data means. It just, numbers just don't, I'm not a numbers person. I was a social worker because it included the least amount of math as possible in college. So I am not a numbers person. So this does not come naturally to me. Also on this topic of why you want your community to be a data-driven system, you want to use your data to create a story about your community. Let's see. Yeah. I guess that's all I wanted to say. You just want to make sure that you're telling a story with your data. And like I said, this does not come naturally to me. So we're going to talk about ways that you can, that we can do this in our communities. So let's see, we felt like these are the main reasons you would want to be a data-driven system. It's so important that we're making decisions based on numbers and not just on what we feel should happen or what we want to see happening. And then we want to make sure that we have measurable goals, and having data, and not just data, but good data, helps us identify and set measurable goals. We can say we want to improve our systems by 10%, or we can say that we want to decrease homelessness or episodes of returns to homelessness by this percent. So you can have measurable goals instead of having kind of vague or just saying our overall goal is to decrease homelessness. But then you actually know how you're going to do that through measurable goals. And then and this is really important too, is to identify gaps. If you're always doing what you've always done, it's hard to make change or create change in your systems. So having good data helps you identify the gaps in your community and where you need to make improvements or you need to add new programs. And then having good data helps with consistency. And then finally, funders love numbers. I cannot think of one report where we haven't had to include data on our programs, what we're doing, how we've improved, and what we're doing to move forward. So I think that last point kind of hits home that funders love numbers. Anything you want to add on that, Summer?
Yeah, I was just going to talk a little about how we're identifying our measurable goals and looking at our numbers through our data subcommittee right now. So I just wanted to kind of bring up that, right now, like Andy said, we're trying to get all the programs in our community and look at the data as a whole. And so what we've been doing is trying to create a spreadsheet and a dashboard to have program specific and community-wide numbers, and hopefully that we can use and post so the rest of the community can use that. We also, I just was gonna say, since you mentioned the 10%, I think we're trying to, as much as possible, align directly with the state homeless plan. And so our community goals are to improve by 10% on each one. So that was kind of the easy part on how to develop those measurable goals and outcomes, is because we did try to align with the state's plan.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Summer. That's a really good point. We did, it's interesting how comparable our plan is to the state homeless plan, which is really good in meeting both the requirements of both plans. So yeah, that's absolutely.
And I was also going to say that, you know, I think it's important to mention that we do utilize the homeless dashboard for data, but we recognize that there's concerns. And I think that obviously we would like additional features like the ability to filter out by LHCC or look at performance data from programs like Rapid Rehousing and PSH. But I think that that's something that our community has never had. So I'm excited that they implemented that, and I look forward to new and future things that will come of that or of new things.
Yeah. You know, and from our plan, like I said, data is really important. I hate it. And I don't enjoy working with it. But one thing that I was really surprised by after our plan came out was that over the last few years, homelessness in Weber County had increased by 48%. Now that's based on per capita, and but if you're not looking at the data, you really don't know where you're at in your community, and that's so important. It's so important that as we're you know, moving forward and trying to you know, a lot of times we just keep our head down and we're just doing our work, but you have to keep those numbers in mind so that you can make a difference in the work that you're doing. But that was really surprising to me, and those numbers were readily available. Those were it was just taken from the point in time count. But like I said, if you don't know what the numbers mean, they're not going to be helpful for your community. So, anything else you want to add there, Summer?
Nope, I think you covered it.
So we wanted to open this up for questions. And so if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and then we can answer your questions. And then we have a couple of questions that we want to ask the group. So we'll give you just a minute to raise your hand.
At least it's not as uncomfortable, because when you're all, you can see everybody's face trying to like look the other direction, not call on you. So at least everybody can kind of hide behind their screens, which is cool, which is nice.
Yeah.
And I have muted, or I've allowed El Navido Damoskis to ask a question.
Perfect.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I guess it's not much of a question, but I mean, obviously I was involved in this plan, but do you want to maybe speak to how agencies that were involved at the LHCC level, how you engaged them and solicited them to participate? I know through a lot of meetings in our state, we hear about agencies that aren't willing to participate in the LHCC, and maybe how you reached out and solicited those individuals.
Definitely. Yes. Actually, that's a really good question. Thanks, Lauren. So initially in the very beginning stages, as our LHCC had kind of fallen apart, it was kind of a useless meeting. I had just called a few of our key players, those individuals that come to all the meetings, that are still heavily involved in our systems, and just pose the question, like, we need something in place so that as leadership changes, that we don't have to stop the momentum, freeze the momentum, but that we can keep moving forward. And really, that, I think, it did take I called quite a few people, sent a lot of emails. But once I posed that to them, that we needed something in our community to be some kind of collaboration at a systems level, so that we're all working towards the same goal collectively. Once I posed it and explained it that way, the majority of the service providers were on board and said, "Okay, what do you want us to do? What next?" So that's how we solicited the majority of the support. And then once the plan came out, I think that just solidified it for everybody in the community. It was, obviously, I'm not biased at all, but I think it's a phenomenal plan, and that it really, it will change our community. So thank you for your question, Lauren. Any other questions? Okay, so the question that Summer and I came up with, the first question is, since our presentation is mostly on data, also, is it data or data? I never really know. But anyway, what data is important to collect? So what do you need to be collecting in your agencies in order to paint a picture of what's happening at your agency? And I'd like to open that up to the group as well. Maybe we can have a discussion about that. Anything you want to add on that, Summer?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay. And I was just going to say, while we're waiting to see if anybody wants to participate, again, because each agency is so different and each program is so different, it is important to look at what numbers you need and your story that you're trying to tell. So where I come from, a emergency shelter that also provides other program data, we want to ensure that we capture it all, that we hit every program, and that it's accurate, and that it makes sense. Mm-hmm. So perfect. So I think Summer answered that question for us. Oh, is there somebody that is raising their hand?
Yeah, I've allowed Cheryl. Cheryl, if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, hi Cheryl.
Hello. So I just wanted to say that part of that is you involved non-homeless service providers. And I don't know if that's clear from that you had such good buy-in from a lot of people, you know, cottages of hope for budgeting and just a lot of things like that. So I think it was good to pull so many people in so that you had the supports built in and you knew who to contact. That's all I wanted to add. Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. Actually, Cheryl was instrumental in helping us get this. She was one of the first people I called when I said, what should we do about this? And she is key in our community, and she's retiring. I always said when she retired that I would also retire because without her. But you're absolutely right. It wasn't just homeless service providers. We solicited all agencies in our community. I mean, and we even had like the school districts. We had individuals that typically wouldn't and don't normally participate in our LHCC. So it was
it was a really robust conversation around what our community needed, which I think was really helpful. It's always helpful to get those perspectives on what others outside of the system, what their perspective is.
And I think that also helped going forward with other businesses, agencies coming in and stepping up and saying, okay, we want to be part of this too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And because they were involved in that ground level, it just opened up more doors for us to be able to present the information and then to be able to say, this is what we're doing like as a group, not, not just my agency or Summer's agency, but as service providers collectively, this is what we're doing.
And I remembered when we first started coordinated entry like 300 years ago, and we were trying to really say, okay, the client is not Andy's, the client is not Summers, the client is the communities, and our homeless system and our plan and our LHCC is the communities. It's not one agency, and so you definitely have to switch your thinking with all of this. So you're not so focused on my agency, my client. And I think you've been a really good example of that. So.
Yeah, I agree. And that coordinated entry, I feel like we're doing a pretty good job and we've counted coordinated entry. So our next question is, how do we get started to become a data-driven community? So what can you do in your community to become data-driven? And feel free at any time to raise your hand, but I'll let Summer kind of go into how to get started on becoming. Is that okay, Summer? Are you good with that?
Yes, or I was going to say, other people can say what they're doing or the steps they're taking. I'm not sure if people have been implementing data
other strategies
and other strategies. And so I think that would be interesting and helpful to hear from other people how they are becoming a data-driven system and how they're involving their LHCC as a community.
Perfect.
I wish I could call on people. No.
You technically could.
So I guess since we're about done, I just really think to just even start looking at becoming a data-driven community and decision-making is to go to your LHCC, start from the beginning. Do we have the right people at the table? I mean, I think that's why we went through that whole process and here's the recommendations. This is what we did to show that there is a lot of work to start moving in that direction. And a lot of it is having the right people at the table and then saying, okay, what do we need? How can we get it? But I think that everyone knows how important it is and everyone wants to get there. It's just how to get there. And so I think that's why it was so important to show the process and then what we decided to prioritize out of all the recommendations.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that, Summer. And I think even before we had commissioned the plan and the plan came out, I think we knew that we needed to focus on being a data-driven system. That is so important. And for funding and for grants and to paint a picture. I mean, there's so many reasons, but I think if nothing else in your community, if you can be data driven, I think you're miles ahead of the rest. So thank you for participating. Here, feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions. And we appreciate your participation.
Thank you, guys.
And just kind of a side note for tomorrow, Trisha Davis, who is in charge, who's letting us know about all this tomorrow, we will be leading straight into the sessions. There will not be like a general overview session. So that'll start at 9 o'clock. But again, we'd like to thank Andy and Summer for doing such a great job of presenting today. And if you guys do have any questions, please reach out to them either through the HPO office or through their emails. So that way we can get your questions answered.
Thank you.